We don't have any agenda for this. This is an opportunity to chat. So we're happy to talk about our perspective about things or answer questions or ask you questions if there are questions you want us to ask you. But go ahead.
So is there any plan regarding Ubuntu distribution of Racket? I understand that the PPA was not working because the Debian doesn't work, but now it works. So can we expect that the next release will have Ubuntu ready?
So, I mean, the Ubuntu package has been built by Asumu Takikawa for a long time. I don't know whether he's going to continue developing that now that the issues there are fixed. If he's not, I hope that we can find someone else who's interested in doing that.
Sorry. Sorry for interrupting. I was going to say, purely from my standpoint, what I can say is that when I discovered that Ubuntu was downstream of Debian, basically I stopped sending immediate emails to Asumu because those were pointless, right? And so I think one thing on me is to develop a mechanism just to figure out when the Debian upstream is midstream, whatever, is ready, so that I can send Asumu a useful email that he can actually act on rather than sending him an email that he just has to sit on for a while. So yeah, David Bremner is also in the loop here. I think I can say his name out loud. Yeah. So he's Debian, and then there's Asumu. So yes, I think the short answer is I have no reason to. I absolutely think the Ubuntu PPA should be. I'm optimistic.
Everyone just wants to go to lunch.
Hi, I'm Mika. So I know in OCaml, they have put together, communities put together an analysis of the greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions of all of their ecosystem, like GitHub Actions and package server, website, things like that. And I'm wondering if there's anybody in the community, this is less of a specific question, that's interested in doing something similar of, just kind of I don't know, tracking what the effect of Racket is outside of just programming world.
That's definitely an interesting project. I would be happy to help someone who wanted to take that on.
Can I say as an add-on to that or as a related project to that, just recently in part of State of Racket, I was thinking, it would be cool if we had a list of how many downloads, we had, and if we had some kind of tracking, and I feel like we've had some conversations about this that have kind of not come to fruition. So it'd be cool if somebody was it. Well, I mean, yeah.
We have some logging, but we don't do anything with it.
Yeah. Okay.
For the live stream. We have some logging of those that could be used to produce that data.
And then there was that longer discussion about whether people. There was that longer discussion about whether people would be willing to click a button that says yes, I installed Dr. Racket, and then there was a long kind of opt-in, opt-out kind of, and then we gave up, I think. So if we have all the mics up on stage, then there's really no more questions, right?
So I've been involved with the Geeks project for about going almost on 6 years now, and I haven't really had the time to explore the Racket build system, but I know other people have worked on it. But I'm curious in slowly researching into it. If I wanted to understand internals of Racco, because that's essentially what it would be wrapping, what would you suggest? Where do you suggest I start? And I realize I could probably do some more research on my own for this, but I'm taking advantage of this situation here to do that.
The heart of it is probably compiler / private / CM minimal.
CM
So
min-
CM minimal. CM stands for compilation manager.
Okay.
So that's the core piece that needs to be able to find the other modules and organize. The more I think about it, maybe that's not the relevant starting place. Maybe the different options in the configuration file. That's usually under etc. So etc config.rktd. Those are maybe the relevant things. So we've done some work to try to make different layered and package-oriented things work. But it's hard to have all the same option, have all the right options that different package managers need and that Rackoa needs. I guess I don't have a better answer for you than looking there and seeing what kind of configuration is possible, and then trying to understand how that maps to the other installation mechanisms.
Yeah, I could also follow up on like later.
Yeah,
Once I have some notes from other people that have done initial research on it.
Yeah.
That's not myself, but I have access to those.
Yeah, so if something is missing, some feature is missing, then that's the kind of place where it goes. But the thing is, search paths are hard, and the only thing worse than a search path is another search path, because then it affects all the other tools that use it. And so that's why there's a whole lot of options there, and why every new thing that we add is kind of a quadratic process of realigning everything else. But so hopefully when you look at it, you'll find good pieces. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's one more thing we need to do there to make it all work finally.
Okay. Actually, I have another question. This is a question for Sam, and it's somewhat of a green question in the sense of, so I haven't worked with Racket a ton, but I'm looking to find an excuse to get more into it, and I think I want to approach it through typed Racket, like just getting into Racket through typed Racket itself. And I wanted to know what your personal recommendation is to like really dive deep into typed Racket. It's like kind of a general question.
So it sort of depends what you're looking to do in terms of, if you know Racket, then bringing just trying to bring things that you've already written in Racket into typed Racket is usually what I would recommend. If you don't know Racket, then often the easiest thing to do is to take some of the Racket tutorial material and just try to work through it in typed Racket. So for example, for experienced programmers, the tutorial material that I usually recommend is the systems programming in Racket tutorial, and where you build a web server, and that turns out to work really nicely in typed Racket, and so that's a good way to get your feet wet in typed Racket. And then the other thing that I would recommend is talking to Adam over here, who for a long time taught programming using typed Racket, and I'm sure has a lot of wisdom that he could impart about how to learn that.
Oh, thank you for that recommendation. I'll take that up.
I just wanted to add one more thing about Geeks and Racket, which is that there has been work, as I think you know, on building Racket in Geeks, right? Do you know about this?
Oh, implementing Geeks in Racket, you're saying?
No, building Racket on Geeks.
Okay.
Geeks is a GUIX. It's a immutable build system for free software projects. And so I guess you've probably seen some of that work, right?
So building Racket on top of Geeks.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give a TLDR on,
And
like if you were to say something, a description of that, just so I think I'm not on the same page yet.
I mean, is what you were asking about the build system and integrating it, right?
What I was thinking is that Geeks has build systems.
Yes.
And one of the build systems would be a Racket build system, which would make calls to Racco to do the respective things like run the tests or install the package inside of the GNU store.
That's what I mean. That,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
So I recommend talking to Philip McGrath.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked about this yet. It's on my
Yeah,
to-do
so
list.
he's
but-
done a ton of work in working on that integration specifically. So I
okay.
recommend talking with him about it.
Yeah, I've interacted with him before on the internet on various occasions because
Yeah.
I have commit access to Geeks and I've contributed
Yeah.
a lot to the project. But I think there's some other people also that have, I think before Philip, have also
Yeah.
worked on the build system, but it just hasn't progressed yet.
Yeah, but he's the person who knows the most about that integration process and knows a lot about the
Okay.
Racket build system as well.
Okay, I'll follow up with him then. Thank you. Okay.
So the suggestion that David just made is wrapping a web API in typed Racket as a learning project, which I agree with is an excellent project.
If you guys could start the Racket project over again, what would you do differently?
I mean, I would learn something about building compilers before spending a couple of decades building compilers. So that's an easy call. And do better macros in the first place.
I think the answer I thought Matthew was going to give was write less C code.
That's another way of saying the same thing.
Hi, I'm Sid, as you know. So regarding the question that Sam had posted on the State of Racket slides from Joel about the direction the community is going in and what the core team leadership has in mind. So Matthew, you had an interesting response to that question, which was the observation that over time, the core team seems to have had less of a role and the community has taken on more. For instance, RacketCon being community organized. So do you see that trend continuing of the core team becoming more amorphously defined and the community taking on more of a role? And if so, do you see any, or do you have any ideas or plans for what that community governance structure might look like?
So I think, yes, I definitely agree with that. And I think that process has been, as you say, ongoing and really important and valuable. So last year, for example, at the State of Racket, I talked about the people who are now helping me run various systems that power the Racket package server and such. And I occasionally restart things, but the contributions and maintenance and development has been entirely driven by people who are not sitting on this stage. And that's been really great. And I think most likely that's the most important way in which this trend is going to continue, is that the set of things in the Racket community that are represented by commits to the Racket/Racket repository are just going to become a smaller portion of the total investment that this community makes in software, community, infrastructure, gathering, communication, etc. And so the set of people who maintain those files in that particular Git repository, maybe in 10 years will still be, Matthew will still be the person responsible for most of those files, but as She becomes more important, as Racket mode becomes more important, as VS Code becomes more important, as so many other pieces of software become bigger parts of the community, then that means our role as this set of people becomes less central.
Can I also say, this is purely me personally, I would also love to see more people sitting on the stage.
Yeah, I agree with that. That there's some roles that like we have to sign on various dotted lines for, but those aren't very important. And the more important roles are about community leadership, and I think the moderation team is an example of explicit leadership roles for more people, and I really hope that trend continues.
Sounds good. So that sounds good. Do you have any specific thoughts at this stage about what community governance might look like over time, or is that something that we'll like figure out over time as these changes occur?
I think I don't have any thoughts that are fully formed yet. I think, as John said, broadening the set of people who are part of the Racket leadership is an important part. That, of course, has happened. As 20 years ago, I wasn't the person giving the state of Racket talk, and when I was a lowly undergrad. But that process has to continue, and otherwise Racket won't continue evolving the way it needs to.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, Sage Gerard. How do you determine who to thank and who becomes more like a metric in the discourse community? Because I feel like I have a very strange sense of how attribution works in the community. It feels like kind of in other academic circles, you have some people who get like way more credit than others. And I wanted to know how you all have reasoned about that internally.
Is your question like how I picked the particular people to put on the slides, or?
That is one example.
So mostly I looked at my email inbox and the blog posts on the Racket website for like things we had announced, and then made some seat of the pants judgments about which particular people to thank, and like some people sent me messages saying, please make sure this person gets some credit, and so I did. And so those are all sort of inputs, but mostly I just made it up.
Got it. Yeah, I was wanting to know if somewhere in the evolution of the Racket community, would there be some way to help remove some of the subjectivity from that process so more people are attributed?
So I think, one place where we have removed subjectivity is like John has a program that computes the set of people who are attributed in the release notes. So that includes everyone who contributed. And yeah, so I think having ways to make sure that we don't miss people is important.
Yeah, it was. I remember the generated list, but I didn't know if that was all from the Racket commit history within the organization, or also within the auxiliary kind of wikis and blogs that you were mentioning. I don't know if there's like more programs that could be added to add names to the list of attributions. Maybe that could be an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a valuable thing to consider.
Okay, thank you.
I also think that if there's any questions about, if people get missed, or there's some general kind of some what's the word, a trend or some general pattern of people that are somehow being missed, then like let's hear about it, and let's see if we can fix that. That's usual kind of approach to life that we learned about as software developers. When there are bugs, we should try and first open an issue and then a pull request, and then maybe we can, yeah. Yeah, yeah. We're very happy to hear about ways we've made mistakes. That's sort of like, that's the usual thing.
Hello, I'm Shuhong. I'm a little curious because, as I understand, currently the core dev team have the development experience and the using experience of Racket mostly on Mac. And I wonder, has the development pay any attention to Chromebook? Because we constantly get like a certain percentage of students using Chromebooks for every quarter.
Yeah, so I definitely run into this problem. So I will say I don't use a Mac, and sometimes I am also frustrated that too many of my fellow developers use Macs, and so don't run into the bugs that I run into. But I do think that how to provide quality software development environments on Chromebooks is a hard and important problem, and I don't like right now the solutions that I know about are install Linux apps, which is what we have our students do, and rebuild all of Dr. Racket on the web. And unfortunately, there's a long way to go between that screenshot that I showed and Dr. Racket.
Yeah, thank you. Right, because one issue that we actually encountered is that Chromebooks uses Linux apps and then installs somehow and not a necessary latest version of Debian. So the default Dr. Racket version is like sort of behind the release. And when there was like one time a change to the WXME serialization, that makes the files we provided not openable by the students. So actually, like, we're kind of surprised to find this out.
Yeah, I do think, I mean, WXME backwards and forwards compatibility is an unfortunate problem, but not, maybe Matthew has ideas about how to fix that.
Just don't change it anymore.
But if there's a particular version of Debian that needs to be more in our CI or something like that, that would help us be a better match for Chromebooks somehow, or would be more aware of these problems earlier on, then we should probably look into that somehow.
It's not a particular version, but sometimes Chromebook could be like, sometimes like one stable version behind the latest Debian. And as I like heard of from the latest Debian release, there will be like once every 2 years version fix, like version freeze. That would also be 1 or 2 versions behind the latest Racket release.
So this is Chen Hao. My question is that maybe, I hope this is wrong. From my perception, it seems Racket is now mostly a research language, which is limited to people in academia or in some sense hobbyists or people working on it as a side job. It is not industrially adopted. Maybe I wasn't aware, maybe there's some startup or whatever they use. It's for example, it's unlike OCaml, Jane Street, which is, I guess, a big name uses. So I know there's some kind of business rationale. Maybe that's my take. Actually, that's a statement I made when I met Robbie the first time 5 years ago. I said, maybe people, choosing these industry companies, they make decisions about programming language mostly the business rationales. But I wonder if the community is trying to promote its industrial adoption, or that is not the priority.
So first, I guess I just want to recognize the people who are here who are not academics. Like obviously the 4 of us are, but lots of people in the audience and who use Racket are not academics, and people here are using Racket to do their jobs. And so that's that is a really important part of the community and an aspect of the community that we really value. If any of you are principal partners at a large trading firm and would like to make a multi-million-dollar investment into Racket, please talk to me after this. But unfortunately, I try as I might, I haven't talked Ron Minsky into switching to Racket. But I think we're doing the thing that we know how to do, which is build a high-quality system, build a vibrant and inclusive community, and demonstrate those values, and hope that that's something that is attractive to people who want to do all kinds of things with Racket. And I'm sure there's ways in which we could be doing things better to attract more people in academia, outside of academia, in open source, in commercial development, and we want to improve in all of those ways. But I don't have any plans to sign Goldman Sachs up for a big contract in 2024.
I just wanted to add that like some of what we were saying in like the question earlier about community involvement and all these things, we come from a certain perspective and our lives are, some percentage already lived, and that's affected how we think and what we know and what we're good at and what we're bad at and what we understand. And that's gone into Racket just by the virtue of the fact that we've been around Racket for a long time. And so that this recognition of our own lack of generality somehow is one of the big things that's behind what we were saying earlier about how it's important to get more people on the stage, important to bring other people in. So there's, somehow, you see all our jobs here, and so, there's sort of an implicit effect on how things grow based on just what we know about it and what we do in our day jobs. So.
I just wanted to comment that I think the...
Please talk into the mic.
Yeah, my name is Jorge, or JGuard Online. But before I ask my question, I just want to comment that I think the fact that there's such good collaboration with a compiler as impressive as Shay might lead to opportunities also for industrial use. And the fact that it's really Racket's being a first-class consideration for the future development of Shay. So I think that's really great to see. So there's a question for Sam, and it's regarding what are your thoughts on let me see how to describe this, like an alternate notation for typed Racket where the types go completely away and everything's completely inferred, or please inform me if there's someone that's already kind of on that research project.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the talk, reducing the amount of annotations that's needed is definitely something that I'm interested in, and my student Fred, who's here, has been working on that. But that's not a system where there's going to be no types in your program. It's a system where probably you need fewer types in your program, which can be a big benefit to people who want to use typed Racket. I think if you want a system that's doing some sort of type-based static analysis of entirely unannotated programs, that's a sort of different kind of project. No. You have to leave, John?
I do. I'm going to take off. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Or, well, that's actually what I was trying to hone in on is why would you not be interested in full type inference without any types, but having a robust type inference in Racket programs so they don't have to do the annotations?
I think it's an interesting project. It's just a different project. than typed Racket. And I think a system where you're primarily looking for a traditional typed programming environment is one important use case, and that's going to be driven towards different technical decisions than one where you're working in an entirely untyped language, but trying to get some whatever interesting static analysis feedback you can. And those are just going to have different constraints and different approaches. And I think one of the reasons that projects like typed Racket and other similar projects in other languages have been successful, whether that's TypeScript or MyPy or Sorbet or all these other systems, is that unlike systems that people were developing 20 or 30 years ago, they're not trying to do both of those things at once. And so I think trying to do those separately is important.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Shaw from the University of Chicago. I have a question and then a comment. So at UChicago, we taught typed Racket to fairly large groups of students for a period of something like 5 or 6 years. So, and by large, I mean we taught maybe 180 students at a time in several groups per year. So we taught a lot of people this language. I wonder what is unfortunately, in my view, we made a switch to Python, which was a political and ideological battle that was hard fought on all sides, and typed Racket lost, unfortunately. I stood up and made the best case I possibly could. I wonder is anyone teaching typed Racket now? Do you know that?
So I know that John, who literally just left, teaches with typed Racket. I know that Eli Barzilai at Northeastern University in his programming languages class teaches with typed Racket. So I believe that the people teaching with typed Racket that I know are mostly teaching programming languages rather than teaching the sort of how to design programs curriculum with types.
Right, rather than intro. So if you could all indulge me for a moment, because I wasn't planning on, I was just coming here to listen to interesting things for the weekend. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but it did occur to me since Jorge asked about learning typed Racket. This is kind of a silver lining, I guess, of the pandemic. So just for context, I discovered during the pandemic when UChicago went fully remote, as I assume those of you who teach, a lot of your institutions probably also did, that I really don't like teaching on Zoom. I really don't like it. Like what my students would do is they would often turn their cameras off, and then it became kind of contagious. So I was teaching to a screen full of black rectangles, and I would ask, like, are people following me? And the little yellow hands would come up. And I just thought that was a completely deficient way of interacting with my students. I also would put them in breakout rooms and give them little problems. Like, here's a little Racket function I want you to try to write. Put them in breakout rooms of 4 people each. And the students came back and reported to me that I sat in my breakout room for 8 minutes and no one said anything the whole time. Apparently this is a common phenomenon. I don't know if you experience it directly or indirectly, that people go to breakout rooms and they don't do anything. So my response to this was basically to become a sort of home video producer. I have a video editing piece of software called Camtasia, which the department bought for all of us. Does anyone know Camtasia? It's like a click and drag. It's a lot of fun, actually, for making movies and stuff. So basically what I have, because of the pandemic, is I have like I want to say like 20-hour series of short lectures that teach you an introduction to programming in typed Racket with exercises. Furthermore, I could post the solutions to the exercises because, unfortunately, no one will ever plagiarize them ever again because I don't think we're going back. Anyway, I just wondered if maybe I should look into just putting this thing online, and because it would...
Yeah. Yes, is the answer.
It would not only be a way to learn typed Racket, but it's a way to learn programming. And one thing we really pushed hard, and one thing I really miss now that we're not doing it anymore, is Dr. Racket's ability to enable you to have images right there in line and to create GUIs in a very, elegant, minimal. The way you write the callbacks and the types of the mouse handler and the key event handler are also they fit so well, they dovetail so well with the thread of teaching typed functional programming in the first place that to me, that was a secret sauce that was what are we looking for? The magic recipe that made it so delicious. And in the 2 quarters we taught this course in the fully remote pandemic that I taught it, in 1 quarter, our end of quarter project was to build an interactive crossword puzzle player. Like we had a data format for crossword puzzles, and you fed it in, and it made a picture of it that you could click on and interact with. The nice thing about that is, like, drawing a crossword puzzle grid is just like fold over a list of cells. And the nice thing about that is it looks like exactly like a crossword puzzle in the New York Times, because the graphics are simple. It's just squares. But you put it in this file and you get something that's like no one on earth could not know what it was. So that was nice. And then the second quarter we did it, the end of quarter project was to do a calendar that you could make appointments in, but it would draw the months, so I had to figure out whether it was leap year and where the Mondays went, et cetera. That was a nice project too. But maybe I should just talk to my department. I don't know whether there's any reason I couldn't, but maybe just throw the lectures on a website, people who wanted to learn typed Racket for whatever reason.
Yeah, so yes, you should do that. So I had a very similar experience, as I'm probably Matthew and Robbie did as well, though Matthew's been doing this for a long time. Did you know that Matthew has a blog where you can read all 3 of his blog posts about having a flipped classroom? There's just the one blog post. Yeah. But I also put all the video lectures that we made up on YouTube, and I mean that's been valuable for teaching the class. But it's also really nice when someone asks a question on Discord about, like, how do I use structs or something like that. It's just there to be pointed to for anyone who's trying to learn Racket, as well as people who are specifically in the class I'm teaching at a particular time.
I'd say you should think of this as a textbook you're producing, I mean, it won't smell in 20 years, but aside from that, it's pretty much a textbook, and that's universities like it when their faculty produce textbooks, and there are certain intellectual rights that they don't take away from you, unlike what they sometimes try to do with software. And maybe that's how you should approach this, as you're producing a textbook. And we link textbooks on racketlang.org when people produce new ones and stuff.
Right. Actually, I guess I kind of have that question. Do you think there would be any reason why I wouldn't be entitled to just put my lectures on? Like, no one's going to care.
Declare it a textbook.
I recommend not taking any legal advice from the 3 of us, personally.
Yeah, that's good advice. I second his advice. Do it anyway.
Hi, Sarovi again. So I want to ask your opinion on backward compatibility. In particular, I mean, I developed both Racket itself and also developed some libraries that use Racket. And it's really painful to deal with breaking changes. Racket has kind of like culture that try to not break backward compatibilities, but then like that just makes life difficult, right? Like, Sam, for example, proposed the guide on Scribble, I think, or maybe HTML or something, where you expect IE6 to work for the documentation.
I did not say that IE6 should work.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think like IE12. Do you know when? Probably some people here were not born when IE6 was released.
Anyhow.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah. Do you have any thought on that, or like, are we being over serious on preserving backward compatibility? And the second part is like, do you think it is going to be possible to implement version pinning for libraries so that they can make major breaking changes? Because like, I mean, I want to develop libraries, right? Like part of the reason why I have not released this second version of the formatting library, even though I promised like a year ago, is that like I don't want to break the backward compatibility, but I also cannot find a good way to preserve stuff. Like in other languages, right? I would bump the major version, and then I can make any change that I want.
One answer is the way you bump the major version is put a 2 at the end of your library name. People don't like that, so to go back to your other question, yes, it would certainly be possible to add versions and version pinning to the package system, and it's just some work to go do it. So, yep, sounds possible to me.
I think there's some hard design questions to be figured out and how to make it effective in doing it. And I think I'm one of the people who's always like backwards compatibility, or death. But I think there's a lot of interesting research challenges actually in getting and looking around also and understanding what others have done and has and hasn't worked, and how in order to be able to have something like major versions where backwards compatibility is not necessarily preserved.
Thank you.
Also, I think whether to be really backwards compatible is, as a sort of ecosystem, is a big choice in the culture. And some ecosystems make a choice towards strong backwards compatibility. So that's what you see in, say, Rust, for example, or like in C++. And that's the choice we've made in Racket. And other ecosystems, like the Haskell ecosystem, values backwards compatibility less. And that's a different cultural choice that has pluses and minuses. But I don't think, we're not just starting this project today in 2023, and we have a long legacy and value of backwards compatibility. It's a valuable part of the Racket project, and so I think that's an important thing to continue.
Hey, Sage again. I was on that note, do you see a software engineering solution to decouple the norms of a culture from the technical benefits available to that culture?
Can you expand on that a little?
Sure. So like in my presentation, I was talking about how parameterizations play a huge part in how we expect a Racket program to behave. If you have Hashling something, it basically has unknown behavior until you know the parameterization in effect. And I've experienced the Racket community as more or less agreeing to use a largely unconfigured or default configuration for Racket, because that tends to work. But you get some variation, like if you set the read accept bar quote parameter to a different value, then you can get a whole different set of programs out of that. And I would think things like a default value for that parameter can set a whole different culture, right? Do you see that as like things that are way too coupled together? Like, is there a way to split those apart where you can set a parameter and not have to worry about changing cultures in the process?
Can you elaborate? So my immediate reaction is the answer is Hashling, that you pick a different name after the Hashling. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. If I use a Hashling now, I'm still basically subscribing to the Racket way of doing things, the backwards compatibility profile, mutual compatibility between libraries within the scope of an installation or in the scope of a user's add-ons to that installation. But if I don't want to subscribe to that on account of using Hashling, that's part of the challenge, is I would want to change languages because I want to change cultures, not because I want to change syntax and semantics according to a model somebody else made up. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Has that been a discussion internally? Is this still not making sense?
Well, the last part I can answer, no. We haven't discussed things in those terms. I guess my follow-up then is Racket, which you have in mind. I mean, isn't that the answer already?
It's one that I'm experimenting with, but there's not enough data to know how well it'll work. That's part of the curiosity, is I wouldn't want to also create the same problem. You know, I wouldn't want to create a culture out of it, but then suddenly people are stuck in that too, you know? It's trying to find a way to fully decouple the norms that we set as designers so that people don't have to follow them if they don't want to, you know. I don't know how to, I couldn't tell you if that problem's solved yet, but it is an attempt.
Yeah. So that's the way I see it as well. I think you're sort of Hashling was our attempt to solve this kind of problem, to have that kind of flexibility. And you're talking about the next, the meta level above that, if you will.
Sure.
If I understand. And
with
yes,
luck.
exploring and trying it is the only way I know forward either. So,
is there a way to, on the same kind of light of increasing attribution, is there a way to create opportunities within this ecosystem to that effect without somebody like me coming along and then basically saying, I'm doing like a semantic fork of the whole thing, you know? I don't want to have to be in that position. I would like to help more.
this I think I understand this part, and yes, that is something we certainly have discussed. You know, how to, most people who download Racket right now, they download what we call the main distribution. But the reason we call it the main distribution is twofold. It's not just Racket; it's one possibility, and we envisioned originally that there could be multiple distributions. On the other hand, we know that the community kind of needs a main one, so we call it the main distribution. So we've talked about it and thought about it, and how to make our web pages adapt, how to make the documentation. You know the way that the package build system puts everybody's documentation at docs.racketlang.org. It's trying to foster that, but it's a hard problem, and I think we're going to have to keep pushing it in various ways.
Yeah, the last comment about adding the 2 on the folder, that was actually one of those stories that I had when I realized that I was kind of in that situation myself. One of my old packages, I was trying to do a breaking change. I moved on and I said, okay, I would like to do version 3 of this project. But I ended up implementing breaking changes in my modules for my existing collection name. I was using a multi-collection package in this context. And then I got the suggestion for 2, but then I thought, wait, I'd have a folder named 2 in a version of 3. So I had this kind of situation where I was counting my project like Xbox releases, and I didn't want to do that. So if it's possible to experiment more, would we be open to things like adding a discourse topic or a Discord channel specifically to this notion of cultural adaptability?
Possibly, but I can't help thinking that just like the way that you get more flexibility is not have Hashling scheme somehow be more flexible, but stepping out and having the next layer outside of that. Maybe what you're talking about is the next layer outside of Racket, sort of the next federation around.
Is it kind of similar to the notion of Hofstadter's step out?
I don't know that one, that reference, but
I'll think about it.
But
Thank
maybe.
you.
Hi, I'm Jorge Jagart. If I wanted to see where to access is there a JSON API available for the Racket package index? And if I wanted to know where the documentation is for that, I tried looking on the front page just now a little bit, but I couldn't find it.
Yes, there is a JSON API. I think Sam's air quotes around for API here. So there are a variety of URLs that you can visit that serve JSON with the data that you can get about the current state of the package system. The API, the Racket, the server that you log into and register your packages on and update their version exceptions or their description, that does not have an API, a public API at all. And but to the degree that there's an API for anything, you can get that information in JSON, although in addition to the S-expression API that Raco package uses. And for example, some tooling, like the thing that if you click on a section header, it tells you in the documentation, it tells you where the source is on GitHub for that documentation that uses the JSON that's served by the package server. So that's available. If you wanted to work on adding a programmatic API to the package server, that sounds great. Talk to me after.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking for scriptability purposes is what I'd be interested in. But I think referring to the S expressions, do you think that the S expressions API would be better suited to the scriptability than the JSON that, like scripting via that. You mentioned something.
I mean, if you're planning to add more features to Raco package, then the S expressions might be the easiest thing. In almost every other situation, then JSON is going to be easier.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So it's 12:30. So thank you all for all your questions and for all your contributions to Racket. And before we finish, I just want to take one more opportunity to thank Sid and Robbie for the fantastic job they did producing RacketCon.
Jesse and Stephen as well. That's yeah, Jesse and Stephen, yeah.